today, excited to kind of run through the last episode here of this season where we've been talking about content distribution and repurposing. And so today, kind of go through a few points we have just around like the future of distribution and kind of what we think will happen and with that, over time, and just a little bit, not necessarily predictions per se, but just sort of based on what we're seeing, kind of where we think things are headed from here. So excited to jump in. I know we have a list of 5 or 6 things and kind of jump in there.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. There's a lot of different things that we've seen over the years and how content gets out into the world, especially in our time doing in content marketing and SEO and all the things digital marketing. So I think we have like at least a good historical reference around like what the types of things that end up sticking around and becoming kind of more fundamental marketing tactics and other things that like kind of fade away. But I think some of the stuff that we talked about before we kind of put this together and like kind of we'll go through are going to be interesting to discuss. Like first being distribution via dark channels or dark social. I think dark channels is a better way to put it because dark social was where it started, but now there's all these different places that you can share content with people directly that are like, it's almost impossible to track.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's certainly one that we've seen more and more. So we do use the self-reported attribution on our inbound lead form, and have heard more and more people saying, someone mentioned you in the Pavilion group, someone mentioned you in a Slack group, some of that. And then, that's a little bit more of a referral mechanism, but I have also had people just share like, hey, I keep sharing your content with our marketing team Slack, or this post is really good. I posted it for our marketing team in Slack to see it. Even the very first guest post you wrote when we launched 10 Speed was a post with Barometrics. And we had someone hit us up and be like, hey, I just shared this with our entire team in Slack. I think it's really good, really helpful, and wanted to chat. And so I think that certainly referrals happen and maybe you hear about those, but the content sharing beyond that and the way that ripples through, Discord, Slacks, all those types of groups, I think are really important and I think will continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I got even a few LinkedIn messages directly about even that example guest post, which is also just kind of like back channeling. Like they were like said similar things. It was shared with them, or they found it and found it really valuable. And you're just like, this is attribution on this is very muddy for if like someone actually became a client of ours or anything. So yeah, I think it's going to continue to grow, especially as like new ways of just communicating with each other happen. And we'll actually probably touch on some of the networks, social networks and stuff that are emerging, because those actually become really challenging because some of them are actually just like either chat platforms or video communication platforms or audio communication platforms, to throw it back to the beginning of talking about the Clubhouse app.
I think it's I think there's like from the dark channels perspective, I think based on, I guess kind of just the way it seems to be evolving I feel like there's just more and more groups and subgroups popping up all the time. And, certainly there's Slack communities and stuff with like 10, 12, 15,000 people. Like those are gonna be noisy, like engagements probably not going to be quite as high, or, if there are people sharing content, it's going to be like just hard to even keep up with it. So I don't know that makes as much of an impact, but there are certainly smaller groups, much, much more engaged. And, probably for most companies, especially most SaaS companies, there are likely some sort of groups, whether it's still in a LinkedIn group, which I guess is another potential one, or Slack or Discord or whatever. But like, I think pretty much everyone probably has little niche groups of their target audience. And so that I think will become more and more a factor of like accepting that it can't be measured, like from what we talked about in the last episode in terms of measurement and what you're doing, but has an impact, and I think 10 times out of 10 people would choose to get their content shared in front of their target audience in some dark channel over trying to guess and push things out more broadly to everyone.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say actually at this point in my life and career, I probably discover more content via direct shares and referrals from people. Just even our team, they share stuff on Slack, like it happens all the time. Like I think it's just going to continue to grow and grow and grow in that way. So the other one of the other ones that we talked about was the paid distribution distribution efforts supplementing your organic efforts. If you can expand on that.
Yeah, I think there's actually kind of similar to what we were just saying with the dark channels. I think paid distribution, that's not a new thing. Like it's been happening for years. Like networks are decreasing the amount of organic reach that you get from your organic social. And so I think that is an area where people have begun to supplement with paid. But I think similarly to what I was saying with dark channels about like you would prefer to get that in front of your target audience rather than push it out more broadly. I think that similarly, rather than hoping that you can build this huge audience that is the right people to be able to distribute to, there are some benefits to be able to say, here's a very targeted group, or here's a very targeted list of people that we want to have as customers, and be able to run ads to distribute your content directly to them. So higher in the funnel, lower commitment, really just kind of trying to build your authority and not necessarily trying to directly drive that lead. But I think, again, gives you that confidence that the dollars you're spending there are distributing that content into the exact audience you want to be in front of. Yeah, totally agree. I mean, it's a kind of a, like you said, it's a, it's not a new thing necessarily, but it's a fundamental and holistic practice, right, of making sure that content gets everywhere. There's a lot of talk out there around paid being, questioning the ROI of paid distribution efforts or paid advertising efforts. Obviously, that's more maybe on the direct PPC realm, but I think it can bleed its way into content. Paid content distribution. Either way, like it's not all or nothing. It's got to be a little bit of this and that to be in being strategic in how you have these things play together. And then once you have it all dialed in and understand how all those moving pieces are playing together, then you should be able to get to the right people at the right time with the right money. Yeah. So I think that's again, you sort of have to just look at what's happening, what's being prioritized within those channels, those social networks, and accept that there's that. But the upside, as I said, is you can be much more targeted and know that your stuff's getting there. So I think that moving then to like the third point that we had, which is like the move into short form. We've seen that certainly happen already, and I think from our discussion, just feel like that's something that will continue to happen. And so it's not necessarily a hard pivot into short form only, but some balance of creating short form just for short form, but then also being able to continue to break down long form into short form. So obviously there's plenty of people that have seen, webinar clips and podcast clips, like that. Obviously we do that, like those turn into smaller, shorter form social clips that can lead into long form if you're interested. But I think if you just look again at the signals from what people are building, what they're prioritizing, even just in the last couple of years, like the YouTube shorts, Instagram reels, the growth of TikTok, even LinkedIn. Like, I don't know if everyone knows this, but I think it's 30 seconds. If your video is less than 30 seconds, it will loop automatically. So again, that's even like a subtle prioritization of that. And Twitter's kind of for a long time had a pretty low ceiling on the length of content video you post there. But I do think that will just continue to be a big area for distribution. And I think that, we going a couple episodes back, we talked about who owns it. Is it a dedicated role? How does distribution happen inside of a team? This is a big area where I think, even just from our own efforts, we know the amount of work it takes to try to replicate stuff and produce it there and publish into multiple channels. Like there's a decent amount of work that goes into that. And so I think that's important, but from a distribution standpoint, I think will be adapted more and more in the next few years. So what do you think about that?
I totally agree. I think we're pretty bullish on short form repurposing of long form content for all these different platforms. I think it is going to continue to grow. Again, we'll touch on like emerging platforms because it's more and more like video and all that like I think is going to, this short form kind of like repurposing in a sense is going to like bleed its way into like other formats that we haven't probably even seen yet. It's just gonna, it's going to keep growing. We're consuming information and content in different ways than we did. That doesn't mean that people are not, and I think we need to make it clear, they are still consuming content in the written form. That is still very much a thing that people still do. I think the internet is trying to say otherwise to some extent. That's why these other formats are becoming popular. But like, I think we talk about this a lot, that this adds to that in such a powerful way.
Yeah, I think to that point I think it's just been heavily weighted towards written content, and I think now it's just sort of like there are better channels, there are better formats that I think they're just kind of like reaching a little bit more equilibrium, getting a better balance of like, no, this topic probably should be a 2-minute video and not, a written blog post. But then things that are still much better consumed and understood and distributed as written content work there as well. So I think it's just sort of normalizing right now. So, but yeah, I think it's a good point. Yeah.
The other one we were talking about too was the repackaging of content into traditional media formats. I think we're seeing this a bit with I think Salesforce is doing this with their acquisition of I forget what the name of the website is. What is their media arm? We'll look it up later. Salesforce has a website where they are producing basically sales related, or probably beyond sales, like related TV shows, web series. And I think we're going to see that a bit more. I think that those are unique pieces of content, in that they don't like exactly point back to necessarily like a blog post or whatever. But I think there's going to be possibly some like merging of the two, where topics can turn into an episode of a specific type of like show. I mean, even a podcast. I think we've done that to some extent.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's been a nice trend there, over the last few years, because I mean, I think the content marketing world seems to be getting all excited about it right now, as if it's a new thing. But I think you certainly could look back to Profitwell, Wistia, MailChimp, even like some of these that were probably 4 or 5 years ago at this point, like really kind of made the commitment to build out this aspect of their marketing, which was much more, the media arm, like become a media company. I think is the approach. And I think it's a great approach. I mean, you can go all the way back to some broader, demand gen growth presentations I did in 2019 and called out and highlighted like some of those benefits and the aspects of doing that and how it really, really rounds that out well. I think the big thing now is I think it feels like some people are expecting this to be a hard shift, that you just abandon anything and everything that may or may not be working already for a company just to build a media company. I think that can become problematic, but agree that I think there's at the end of the day, it goes back to like being a fight for attention, and so it's people are always saying like, oh, you have to create good content, you have to make something worth, consuming and or reading or watching or whatever. And I think those things are still true. And so I think more and more people are paying attention to the production quality. I mean, you look at even just the amount of time and money that people have spent investing in a better Zoom setup with a better lighting and better camera, and some of those things that I think just matter and play out over time. And so I do think that the distribution will continue to move in that direction. I just think it will be more supplemental and like in adding to what people are doing versus something that's going to be like a hard shift.
Yeah. Yes, totally. And for those listening, if they want to look it up, it's Salesforce Plus. That's the website. They similar to Disney Plus and all the other online pluses, but they and the HubSpot one was they acquired The Hustle. So those are the two examples from big players that are doing something like that. But
again, like those are examples of that didn't become their only content marketing. Like
no,
I 100% agree. I think they're great moves. I think it's a great addition, but they didn't stop everything else they were doing. So I think it's certainly a good thing to look at. I think the other thing to look at, and what is probably worth another 2 minutes of discussion here, is like, at what point do you do that? Because sure, I mean, HubSpot acquiring Hustle, yeah, they're already a multi-billion-dollar company. Salesforce doing that, sure. MailChimp was already, billion-dollar company when they created it. Wistia, Profitwell, some of those earlier examples, not massive companies, but they're certainly not like a Series A, super early stage type of company. So I think that's an area where you'll have to figure out the timing of like a bigger investment into that, but also how does that start to evolve into earlier stage, like baby steps into that. So like building towards it versus like, we're going to acquire this big thing because we're a big company, but like, how does that start to shift how people are building into it at an earlier point?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, resources and budget allocation and all that, and like timing a company's growth journey, and to like start to enter that foray is, it's hard to predict. I mean, I think we call it Wistia a lot because I believe we both really like and appreciate what they did because they are ahead of the curve. But like Wistia is an example where that was an extension of their product, in a sense. They're a video platform, and so they were creatively merging the two things as a way to make their content marketing more robust and like resourceful and fun and all that. So like it was educating on video production. Like it's like such a perfect combination when you talk about like HubSpot and Salesforce and all these other ones that are doing media company type things. They're not media. They're not. It doesn't tie to their product. It's just they're just packaging their content and creating different types of content, which is totally cool. But when you think about it from like from a SaaS or product led kind of approach, it's interesting because they are basically making sure that video is the forefront and they're telling stories through video because they are a video company. It's probably a bad way to describe it, but it made sense for them to invest in it early because that was their thing too. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that shift happens and where people do start to pick that up earlier in their journey, to start building into some of those pieces early on. Yep.
Yeah, totally agree. The one of the other ones or last couple that I know we have a couple more, was the creative use of emerging and growing social networks. So again, we talked about ones that have like come out and maybe not and died down after a trend, but like you have the likes of TikTok, obviously, which is really big right now. And we know more marketers are trying to actually get onto that platform, even though that's not necessarily what it was for. So it's like kind of I say it all the time, the Wayne Gretzky skate to where the puck's going potentially. And that's great. Get there first, see if it works. But like, that's not what that platform is for. So it's like using TikTok in a way to as a marketing channel to some extent is interesting, especially for marketers. I think we've heard a few stories around like people using Twitch, which is a video game platform, live streaming platform, but like have been using them in interesting ways to like talk about even. I'm going to bring it back through the lens of marketing, but like talk about marketing things while they play video games. I think there's one person or multiple people that we've seen. I don't know. I'm not calling it out. But either way, you hear these things and it's like, it makes your ears perk up because you're like, that's interesting. Is that going to be effective? I don't know. But like over time, we will probably see more and more uses of these emerging social networks. I know it was a long lead in, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think you hit on a couple of good points. I do think it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. Like it is about attention and like doing something that's unique and good quality. And so I do think, I would maybe push back a little bit on your comment that like TikTok isn't for marketing. Like, I think it's kind of
fair
for
point,
anything and everything, but marketing being one of many topics. But I think what's interesting is that you're seeing, for whatever reason, it tends to be a channel where people feel more comfortable being creative and doing creative things with it. And so that I think has been interesting, seeing a lot more like marketing and sales focused skits and things like that. And I think that's bled into LinkedIn and others. And this is, a question of like, is this entertainment only? Is it like, where do you draw the line? And I think it's fine. And then it just becomes a question of, is that like, how do these things fit into like distribution? Are you in some way saying like, we have this really high performing piece of content, or we have this great webinar, and we're going to actually like take some of that and come up with creative skits that are going to do that? Or do you kind of draw the line just saying like, this channel, the creative aspect of it is what it is. We're not trying to distribute content, no matter how much we sort of modify it to fit, and really just use it as audience building, and sort of like brand awareness building is kind of the pure aspect of it. So to me, that's the bigger question with that one is like, I think we all kind of benefit from the creative, I don't want to call it resurgence, but like that you're just seeing a lot more creativity, and it's, not necessarily a dry polished, like here's 5 things you can do, type of video. And I think that, for me, it's yet to be seen of like how that all fits in and the role that it plays and kind of tying it all together from content marketing, brand awareness, distribution, kind of all of that.
For sure. Yeah. And also, because I don't want to upset any of the successful TikTok marketers out there, it just my point was that it wasn't created with that intention, which most of these all of these platforms are not created with that intention. Obviously, then we
Correct.
adopt them and try to. So I totally get it. It's just, we're just learning how it's being leveraged. Especially influencers on TikTok is so big, right? So brands are successfully leveraging that big time. There's platforms that we know are literally facilitating that process, right?
Yes.
So
Yes,
yeah,
I think with some, sorry, I totally agree. And that's why I was pushing back, just because I think any of the social networks were not created with that intention.
Right.
And so probably a small turn of phrase that you use that I picked on too much, but it's worth calling out, I think. And then it's, I think certainly the consumer marketing side of things, like, I think is just a lot, I don't call it easier, but like more natural, on things like TikTok right now. Like certainly, products and e-commerce, like, click through and, I don't know what it is, like changed my life hashtag or something within TikTok that's like a whole thing that's sort of dedicated to like product discovery and like these things that whatever, like curing migraines and all these different things. And so I think there's a lot that is there, but then I think the B2B side is just sort of learning from that, taking cues and understanding how people want to consume information and some of that stuff. So,
Yep.
yeah, so I think that'll be a really, I'm glad you added that one to the list here, because I think that will be a really big one that's going to develop, in the coming few years for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And then the last point that I think we were going to touch on was community building through, platforms like Substack, Discord, ones where you can really build an audience that have taken some shape over the last few years. Substack being, I think, one of the bigger ones. For those unfamiliar, obviously, like not an email, a newsletter format type of platform, right? For example, there are businesses and brands and people building entire businesses on them. One of my favorites I'll call out, because like we talk about him a lot, is Tom Critchlow. He has an SEO MBA course that's awesome. It's all built, a lot of it's built on Substack. And I know it appears he's doing quite well with it, but it seems like those types of things are going to continue to grow as an easy way, quote unquote, maybe not easy, but an effective way to build audience and get your content out in different ways through a different channel.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, I do think that's been the growing trend as well. I mean, certainly I think the SaaS world has really rallied around the concept of community-led growth. So I think there's that aspect. We've seen over many, many years, like the idea of a SaaS company having a community is not new. And that's been the case. And I think for a long time, that was sort of like people trying to figure out, how do you actually do that and make it work well for your company? And now I think people have cracked the code a bit more. And I think there's just a broader desire and adoption of being part of multiple communities around the right topics and things. So I think that has grown, and I think is becoming a bigger and bigger growth lever for SaaS companies. So I think there's that aspect of it. And I think, the growth again of podcasts, like podcasts were big early on, sort of like died off for many years, and then have really kind of made a mature comeback and like have seen substantial growth and then the quality and everything. So I think, Substacks, I think like Discords and Slack communities, podcasts, any of these where you're kind of building an audience and kind of building a community around topics, concepts, points of view, whatever it might be, I think is really big. And again, distribution then it from that lens is not, we got all these people into our Discord or Slack so that we can post links to our blog posts or, drop in every single podcast episode or whatever. Like that's certainly not the intent behind it. But really that I think the ideas and the discussion that permeate in those, and that, like a Substack, a newsletter is going to be a bit more content forward than some of the others, but it's really the goal. I think that the ideas that you are generally trying to communicate for your company through blog content, video, podcasts, webinars, whatever it might be, the idea is that those things are permeating the discussions and the engagement within those communities, and that's kind of becomes the form of the distribution that you have there.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's not meant to, oversaturate the community that you're building with content, but like content it all informs each other in some way. So like you need to build these things authentically, and I certainly don't want to proclaim that like community building is new to SaaS businesses. It's like what we talk about with all these other things that we've mentioned from the like things that are possibly going to be the future of distribution. It's like an expansion on what we've been doing for a long time in a natural way, but builds on what you're already doing, right? And I think that's ultimately, I feel like, what a lot of these things are good natural expansions and extensions of the things we've been doing, not replacements of the things we've been doing, which is, I think, the key thing that I feel like we talk about a lot these days, and I feel like is good to like point out is like dip your toes in the water of all this stuff and test it out and see what works, and maybe it'll stick around, maybe it'll be great for you, maybe it won't be great for others, but ultimately the future of distribution will keep evolving, so you got to try new things.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think the last thing I would say on community is, like, to your point, yes, it's not a new thing. And my initial thought was, SaaS companies going way back, but like communities in general, more broadly, like that has been a thing for a long time. Like I don't remember exactly when it was founded, but talking with Ross, the founder of Catchco and like Mystery Tackle Box, like a big like fishing company, that started because he created a Facebook group about fishing. And it had like 200,000 members or something like that. And then it was basically like, cool, I've built a community of like-minded people and affinity towards this. Like, let's see if we can create some products and promote from there to this captive audience, and just kind of grows from there. So that I think is interesting, and then especially as you think about the way SaaS companies will potentially change to some degree, like product roadmap. Like that's not a new concept to have a community say like, we want these features and you incorporate there. But I think more and more kind of having some of the community aspects around certain topics or pain points happening earlier, helping inform prioritization. And then also sort of the inverse of distribution is that I think those bring about a lot of great areas for content creation and things that you should be doing. So, so I think that's the flip side and sort of the dual benefit, or it's probably multiple benefits, but the duality of a community, I think it can bring those people together, but then also inform a lot of things before you even do it.
Yep. Yeah. There's a very nuanced relationship there, but the aspect of like building and owning your audience is so powerful beyond just the pure distribution of content.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Cool. Well, this has been good. I mean, I think it's, like anything is yet to be seen. And I think, we'll certainly want to keep an eye on how things progress across, the dark channels, communities, like becoming a media company or whatever that means. Some of those aspects, I think will be interesting to watch over time, and we'll certainly be on the front lines with a lot of our clients and working closely with SaaS companies. So good chat today, and thanks for the time. And go back just a little bit. It's good chat today. So this kind of concludes this season that we're on here, and kind of talking about content distribution, repurposing around that. So be sure to visit 10speed.io/podcast. You can see now all 3 seasons of the podcast will be there, and certainly sign up to be notified as we move forward with season 4. So excited for all of that. Thanks for listening. And thanks a lot, Kevin, for the discussion today.
Yeah. Thanks, Nate. Excited for the future.